So we are recording this class, and this is one that I want to keep for future use. This is going to be, I think, kind of a prescription class where I'm not really overly concerned if we have one Zoomer. I mean, you guys, but this conversation, I think, is incredibly important about how we're going to talk to people in the future and agents who come on to say, like, look, I want to share with you that all the things that you're experiencing for the first time is stuff that these folks have experiencing every day, every week, every month of their entire real estate career. It is not that you'll get to a point where you don't have to deal with this anymore. It's just that you become better at dealing with these things. And so with that in mind, today's class is really the 5 major obstacles while under contract with buyers and sellers. We talk a lot about lead gen and follow up and getting to the table. But once we get under contract, that's when the fun begins. But that's also when the mess begins. And it's our job to keep the train going to the finish line. There's a lot of times it's going to want to have an accidental track shift, but like we have to bring it back. And so I have 5 situations here for buyers, 5 situations for sellers. Now they're a little abstract, they're a little kind of simple, but I just want to hear from all 4 of you. When has this shown up, maybe recently or in general? And how do you like to kind of frame and then approach the problem, right? Maybe what are some clarifying questions you would like to ask before that would happen? What does the actual language with the buyer and seller actually sound like? So take it however you want to kind of take it, right? And we're going to start with ladies first on this end. We're going to start on the buyer side. So let's just first start with managing the buyer's emotions and expectations, because the actual process is pretty straightforward. But Lori, I want to hear from you. While you're under contract and you're on the buyer side, how are you managing the expectations of what's to come and the emotions of the buyer?
So I think the most important part about managing on buyers' expectations is letting the buyers know what's going to happen and educating your buyer and letting them know what's going to happen next. The worst feeling, especially with a new buyer, a first-time buyer, is not knowing what's happening next. And every time something happens, they automatically think it's it's a terrible thing, and the end of the transaction or end of the world. So to manage your client's expectations is to understand what their expectations, but then also to let them know what they should be expecting. So I do have a buyer's guide, especially for first-time home buyers, but even for after, because a lot of times they haven't bought in 15, 20 years. So just to go over what the process is, what they should be expecting, what to expect during inspections. That's the most important thing. So this way, when you do inspections, it's not as emotional as sometimes it can be.
You said a comment in there that I think is so true, that when we're going through this, because we've seen it a lot. Things that come up, we're just like, oh yeah, they came up, we're gonna handle it. But why do you think buyers go red line as soon as the smallest inconvenience starts to pop up? Why does that happen?
Because they don't understand it and they weren't expecting it. So if they expect that there is a possibility or expect that this is going to be, that we're going to, and how we're going to solve it. So what we're going to do when we do the home inspection, and you're going to have a list of things that are going to be, things that you should, things that need to be done immediately. Things that maybe maintenance type of things to plan for maybe 5-10 years down the road, if you're going to need a new roof or whatever. Their inspector's going to give us a whole list like that. We're going to go over it together and we're going to see what we need to make this go forward and it works. So this way, when it does happen, it's, they're like, okay, this is all right. This is what we really, really think we need to move forward. So, and then I can go and what they need to know also, that there's a possibility they're going to say no. And what are we going to do at that point? And that's not sure. Same thing with if we have an appraisal, set them up. Especially in the past, this market that that we've been in, where we're offering way more than sometimes you think the house is going to appraise for. Appraisals. To make sure that they understand that they, if they don't have the additional money, the seller can say, no, I'm not going to, the possibilities. And we talk about that. So And then another really good thing I have in the back of my buyer's guide, and if anybody wants a copy, I mean, it's really, honestly, it's just something I got from, I think it was from KW, it was online or something, and I just did it to things that I wanted to add and take out. But the glossary, the glossary of all the different things of the different, things of the sale. So they understand what it and what an EMD is. They're like, what's an EMD? In all the different things.
Chris, let's just roll right to the managing this buyer's expectations and emotions.
Started at the very beginning. So when we discuss what we're going to do, hey, you need to get pre-approved. You need to understand what a pre-approval is and what it gets you. Hey, when we go under contract, these are the steps. This is how it's going to work. One of the key things that we get into is inspections and negotiations. But with my clients on both sides, but on the buyer side, I say, hey, understand that these are the things, right? Understand that you may have to X, Y, Z. Understand that the seller may have to X, Y, Z, right? Understand that there will be complications. They happen in every single transaction, and let's be proactive versus reactive. So if they come back and say, hey, we want a higher EMD, are you willing to go from 1,000 to 5,000? Do you have the money in the account to do that? If we need to do escalation clause, do you have this? Are you prepared for this? So we talk about all of that before we even go out and look at that. Because preparation, right, is so important that you won't find a winner that wasn't prepared.
Yep.
Right? Agreed. Luck favors those who are ready for it. So in that case, all my buyers are kind of sitting there. So as things progress, I just reach out and say, hey, remember when we were sitting down, this is where we're at, this is what we're going to do. And I'm going to be there next to you. Here's my phone number if I'm not readily available. If it's an inspection, I'll be there. If I'm not there, somebody will be there, right? And that's really it. Is in the preparation phase is setting the stage for those things, setting the things and saying the things are going to happen, they're going to come up, we're going to handle them, and we're going to attack them.
I love the preparation theme. Carol,
So when I talk to buyers about just the purchasing process in general, I use the word checkpoint. So when we get under contract, we've just reached one checkpoint. We don't automatically assume that we're moving into the house. So I try to keep their expectations realistic because the inspection could come back and it could be a nightmare. So it's like we're just taking one step up that staircase closer to the house. It might not be this one, it could be another one. But at least now we're moving forward. Same with the inspection. We've accomplished another checkpoint. Then we have the appraisal. We're getting closer and closer to that finish line. But there's nothing set in stone. Even when you have the mortgage commitment, you never know what's going to happen. So just setting that tone before you get there when the inspection comes back and they're shaking because of what it looks like. And also saying to them, like, expectations are what you guys mentioned before, where it's like, this is the professional, the inspector, letting them have their contact information and know that I'm not the interpreter of the inspection either. Like, there are points of contact throughout this whole transaction that are probably more well-versed than I am for certain things. Dollar attorneys on the state. So that's an easy one. I think I had one more thing in my head.
what I'll also say is I want to, as we start to break through each question, if anybody has kind of an aha or a question, please, I don't want this to just be, this is going to be interactive. If you have a question on something that I'm talking, if you've ever read. And then Oliver, we're gonna snake draft it where you're gonna hit this question and then you'll be the further. So bring some.
Some of this is going to be repetitive. Talking to your clients at the beginning, under contract. However, in the beginning, setting the expectations, going through the process. I do talk to my clients during the process before inspection, before appraisal, let them know what to expect. Talking through the repair list, and just making sure for the most part I try to call them before they call me, or at least set up a text. Hey, this is getting ready to happen. I'm going to talk to you at this point to prepare for this next step in the process. One thing that I am working on improving is what I've realized over this last real estate market that we're in, is that sometimes this initial consultation is very far from the time that they go under contract. So some of the things that I'm telling them, hey, I told you this at the presentation, need to be revisited. That process has been taking a little bit longer. So just making sure to revisit those things as we go under contract.
I love how you said call them before.
Yeah.
I was in Bold a year ago and an agent said that they almost lost a seller because the seller said to them, why am I calling you with questions about how the open house went last weekend? And I can't tell you how many times, like, I'm not perfect either. You see that question from your client, you're like,
Yeah.
should have called you at 12 and not waited till the end of the day or
Yeah.
So, do you guys pick up a theme here about what's kind of what they're talking about? I mean, you kind of hit it, but I feel redundant in what I'm saying. And that's because all of you are hitting the same part of you have to future pace these transactions. You have to let them know ahead, very simple, let them know ahead of time what's coming. If you don't, you're going to get that situation where they're saying, what happened? Right? That I always tell my buyers, if you're curious about what happens next, I've failed. Like, that is so much of this. I love that you guys all kind of hit in that.
And I think it's so easy for us as agents or people in the real estate realm to just kind of know what happens next. But there's no class, like there's no class in high school or college that teaches people how to purchase a house or how to sell one. So we have to be very like elementary with how we're going over things. Most buyers don't know what EMD stands for. Like very basic. Like we all are like, oh, it's an EMD. And they're like, it's
Language.
yeah. Yeah, how do you finish that?
Yes. So let's start rolling into scenario number 2. Now, again, that was just a theoretical framework, but now I want to start talking about kind of specific actual actions inside of the transaction. And this is while we're under contract, right? Common pitfalls. So it's going to be the common stuff. We hear your statement. So again, come this way. Let's talk about that home inspection period. Right? We loved the house, we fell in love with it. We're already imagining Christmas there. And then we get a home inspection report back. Now, the report may be good, maybe middle, it may be a nightmare, whatever it is. But talk me through just that initial, okay, we've gotten the report back, or the part of that process, just how are you navigating that with the buyer for the best possible outcome?
So this can be a little different depending on the buyer, right? How knowledgeable they are. However, for the most part, prior to the inspection, I'm, letting them know, hey, the inspector is the expert. They're going to talk to you about all the things that are going on in the house, things that need to be repaired, things that are just maintenance issues. If you have questions on anything you want to do in the future, knock down walls, etc., this is the person that you should ask. Once the inspection is done, we're going to get a detailed inspection report. You and I are going to, I want you to go over the report, find, mark the things that you feel are priority, and then we're going to go through the report together, and I'll give you feedback on those items to construct a repair list. And then working in PA and Delaware, I have to, especially in Delaware, explain to people this is for major defects. So to make sure that they're clear.
What is the defect as you would define it to your buyer?
Something that's not functioning properly as it should, or something that's creating some sort of a safety issue.
Exactly the two metrics I use: safety and functionality. Those are really the biggest ones you can have.
So I had that conversation with them, and then we go through the inspection report. I get the items that they have major concerns with. I talk to them about some things that I see that sellers typically don't repair. Like, hey, I know this is maybe listed as a major. Typically, I don't see this repaired. We can still ask for it. I give them my feedback and some things that I think that they should consider if it's maybe not on their list. And then we work on presenting our base.
That's great.
I think inspection reports can be super daunting because some of them can be 20, 30 pages. And I think going into reviewing the inspection with your client, you need to be aware of your tone and how you are feeling. Because if you're calling them or if you're meeting with them and you already seem nervous or you're like, this isn't great, I don't, instead of being like, look, we have options here. We can ask them to fix it, we can ask them for a credit, or they can say no altogether, or you can deal with it. But just being very, I call it my like kindergarten teacher voice, where it's like everything's fine, everything's okay until there's actually a problem. With that, major defects can be anything, and it varies inspector to inspector too. I've seen in inspection reports like the hot water heater's turned up a little bit hotter because the cellar likes hot showers. That's a major defect. Well, that's taking up a chunk of the page right there. And when you're a buyer and you've never seen an inspection report before, you're going to be scared. But being able to navigate that and say, hey, look, like, talk to your inspector, but this really isn't something that we can ask. Or I mean, once you get to the house, you can turn it up or down whatever you want to do. But that versus a hole in the roof are two totally different things.
So I come at it from a realistic perspective. A great example is this water heater, right? That flagged on the inspection. My buyer's like, "Is that a thing?" I'm like, well, it could be. You know, do you want somebody to go look at it? It could be that they set it for 100 and now it's 150. It could be a runaway water heater. Do you want somebody to address it? We can write it in there. They can have somebody just go look at it. And if they say it's good, it's good. You know, we go check it and it's good, right? But the ball is in your court. That's one of the key things that I try to tell my buyers is that the ball is in your court. I can't tell you how to spend your money. I can give you a recommendation, but I'm never going to tell you how to spend your money, right? I'm also the guy that's going to say, you know, I know there's a bad outlet right there, but you're not going to ask. You don't want to ask, you know, Joe Blow to pay an electrician to go out there and replace that. But you know what? After we close, if you want to go to Lowe's and you don't know how to do it, I'll go over there with you and I'll show you how to do it. We can do it together. If there's a minor project that doesn't require a licensed person that you want to accomplish, hey, after we're done closing, let's go to Lowe's. I have tools. Let's go knock that out. You want to paint that wall? Let's do it. I have a sprayer in my house. Let's get together and knock that out. I find that collaborative like feeling puts them at ease because they know that if there's something that they want done but may be a roadblock to closing the house, that it's possible. Hey, I know a guy that can take care of that pretty easy. I can even get you an estimate on what that costs. So you can say, well, okay, maybe I want to do that, right? And I also come at it from the other side too, and I call the seller. I say, hey, you know, here's the things that I see. I'm telling you right now, I saw this big thing, and I know they're going to ask for it. Can we preemptively get a guy out there to look at that? Right? I know it's bad, so that when I'm talking to my client, I can say, hey, you know, Caroline, I know that you see this big thing, and I saw it too. But guess what? They've already got somebody on it. They're going to send somebody over there to look at it, right? Just so we can get a real good estimate of what that's going to cost, so they can be prepared for that. So I already have an answer for that issue. Now that's not in every case, but when I can, I try to be as proactive as possible.
Well, you guys said, and Lori, I'm going to kind of come to you before we move to the next thing here, but there's a guy, Chris Wallace, who wrote, I think he wrote Never Split the Difference. He's a big negotiator guy, right? I mean, and one of the things he said is like, we've done a lot of studies, and when you say to somebody, hey, I got a little bit of bad news, and then you deliver the bad news, like scientifically, people respond much better to what the actual bad news is. As long as you allow them a moment to brace. And I think you were kind of saying there when it comes to the seller is like, hey, look, I'm bracing you now. I got something going on. Let's see how much we can do in the middle so that when it finally does come over, it's not a deal killer, right? It's not shaking your seller in their boots because it's the first time they're now hearing about it in a time crunch because they've got 14 days of closing, right? So helping people kind of brace for the news. And you kind of did with your kindergarten boys and your like initial laying of options, right? It's that same kind of theory there.
So it was all really, you know, playing on what they've all said. But one thing that I think is super important is, first of all, knowing your inspector and is a huge help. So if at all possible, the inspector that you're using is somebody that you trust and who knows how to deliver news. He knows how to address it with the buyer. And that leads into, I always recommend my buyer be present for the home inspection and follow. This is not to sit around the kitchen table and have your mother-in-law and everybody else come see the house. It's for you to follow the inspector from place to place to place in the house. So you can learn all the different things about it. And where the shuttles are, and when he comes up and says, this, you know, the gutter is not hooked up properly and it's not going away from the building and it's causing issues in the basement, that's why there's moisture in the basement. If that is coming from the inspector to say, this is all you need to do is get a runoff pipe and take it away from there, and you're not gonna have that problem anymore. Rather than on paper, they want the waterproofing done in the basement. It's a huge, I mean, it's very, I think it's super, super important. It's getting to know the house, and that's also getting more into the emotional of, this is my house now. And understanding and being comfortable with it. But also, that sometimes the problems, they've already heard the solution, and the solution was not a difficult one. Now, I'll tell you, God's honest truth. We did that same thing in the house that we're living in 14 years ago, that we purchased for almost 15 years now. And my husband still looks around the house and goes, oh yeah, Vaughn did tell us about that. I never did do that. It's like it was an easy fix and whatever, so, but.
So we're kind of near 12:26, and we want to flip here at the halfway mark to kind of a seller conversation. But so for the spirit of time, I'm going to go to this next topic. I'm going to, Lori and Chris, I'm going to let you guys answer this one, and then Caroline and Oliver, I'm going to have you guys answer the next one if that's okay. Let's talk about appraisals, and let's talk about appraisal gaps and gap coverage. Obviously, there's two parts of this conversation, and you guys all said it in the first one, is the preparation of the what could happen for that, right? But talk to me maybe a little bit about just the dichotomy of what am I telling the buyer when we make the offer in reference to appraisal, and if we are including an appraisal gap coverage. And then when the time actually comes and the appraisal comes in, how is that conversation held there? So kind of when you're formulating the offer, and then when the actual appraisal comes in, and then, a little bit specifically around what happens if it's short. Take me through kind of that beginning.
Okay, so on the seller side, price. Oh, we're still on the buyer side. I'm sorry. So on the buyer side, when we're going in to make our offer, and we're sitting here, we want to be aggressive, we want to win. We have multiple offers in on the property. They have to understand that there's a very good possibility it's not going to appraise for that. And based upon now, sitting down and going over with your lender and seeing what we can do if we get into the situation. Do you want to spend more on a house than what it's actually worth? And this is the house of your dreams. And this is the house you're going to be in for 10+ years. And this is where you really want to make your home. You should not be too afraid of worrying about spending a little bit over, going over what the appraisal is. If you're looking at this as a move-up house and we're only going to be in here for 4 to 5 years, then it might be something you might want to take a look at and go at a different pace. But we need to have a plan that, this is the amount that we're going to go up to, and we can, are you prepared to walk away?
So everything starts with that. So I'm going to look at the house. When they say, when we go see the house and we really like the house, we want to put an offer. Okay, I need to go back and do information before we talk about writing, because I'm going to go back and do the city. I'm going to see what the house is sold for, and then roughly judge them on that appraisal. So if there's a direct comp that's sold for, let's call it $20,000 top, I can safely say that I think if we write it at this, let's say sales price is $20,000 less, we can safely write this way, right? With appraisal gap coverage, I don't prefer that, right? I think that it makes things difficult, right? Because that's $2,000, $3,000, or even $10,000, whatever, that they would have to come out of pocket additional that maybe, and especially now, right? People just can't. So I would rather be aggressive in writing the offer that they can afford versus the offer that they can't. Not to say that I won't, but I do my best to save as much money from the client as possible.
Yeah.
So
I think there's a semantic word choice here that helps us, right? The words we use matter, and Frank was really big about this. Is it called you're going to overpay slightly for the house? Or is it called I'm going to choose an option that allows me to go into a temporary negative equity position on the house for the first 18 months.
I've heard a huge word.
Right. So how you present some of these options are going to be, but again, prepping them on that stage of where that's going to come in and also basing it back on the comps as far as how much risk tolerance should we have, right? Where should that come in and where? So let's jump to our last buyer position here. I have two that I can give you options for. I'm going to let you co-decide which one you want to answer. So I have rate locks and extensions, and I have deadlines and contractual obligations. Which of those two would you rather discuss?
We do deadline.
Let's do deadlines and contractual. The only reason I put rate locks into there is dealing with that on a credit. Let's talk about deadlines and contractual obligations. Now, deadlines, I think, is pretty straightforward.
You have a date.
We have, as soon as time is of the essence, days happen because of the day that we go under contract and everything happens because of that. But contractual obligations are different, and contractual obligations are both under our buyer agency agreements, but also while we're under contract with the home. So how do you have that conversation with the buyer to say, here's how I'm going to handle this with you?
So with contractual obligations, I immediately think of addendums and inspection repair requests and how documents are worded.
Yep.
Be very thorough, but stay away from practicing law. Lean on an attorney if you're settling in Delaware. Even for Maryland, like
Yeah.
your French settles everything great. But advocate for your buyer, not for the seller when you're writing repair requests and addendums. An example being if you want major defects like repaired up to a certain amount. Okay, who's determining that amount? Is it a contractor of the seller's choice or a contractor of the buyer's choice? Because if we're talking windows, I can easily get someone to come out and price out a house for $50,000 in windows or $10,000. That's a huge difference. So being specific in your addendums will save you. Learn from mistakes.
And I always love on the addendums that attorneys always say, realtors always write like they're trying to be an attorney, and attorneys always trying to write like they're a person.
Yeah.
And we always get kind of confused in
Yeah.
the writing. Speak it plainly and
Yeah.
succinct.
You don't need to write all these like elaborate wording. Just say like determined by contractor buyer's choice. Oh, you have to say.
Yeah.
And again, lean into an attorney.
Yeah, sure.
These addendums that we're talking about, and I use the term milestone dates, make sure that you do them. I've been in a position that cost me $4,500 in maintenance costs because I was waiting on the seller to provide me something, right? So make sure you as an agent execute those milestone dates, write the addendum, even if you think it's a warranty or something.
I think with that comes knowing your job and your place in the transaction. Because yes, we all want win-win scenarios for everything, but the bottom line is you're representing the buyer or you're representing the seller. You're not representing your commission check at the end. So some people like, and I'm not saying this about you, but some people like to just stick their head in the sand and put their fingers in their ears and pretend like it doesn't exist till it blows up. Don't do that. Advocate for your.
All right, bringing some on the buyers for the contractual obligation deadlines.
Contractual obligations and deadlines. So one thing we do is when we go under one thing we do in our agreement of sale is put in if a date falls on the weekend or holiday, that date is automatically moved to the next business day.
That is a wonderful tactic.
On my
agreement. I've never really seen a lot of people push back on that either.
Yeah.
And most people are okay with that.
So one thing that I've come across with that in dealing with some agents is that some agents don't read the additional terms in the agreement. So then a date comes up. When I had this happen 2 times recently where somebody had a date on Sunday, I submitted the request on Monday, and they're like, "Oh, you're past your date." And like, hey, go look at the contract I had this. So push back on 2 people that, I mean, we ultimately got it worked out because contractually we're in the time frame. So a couple of things I do in regard to that is I make sure my client, when they go under contract, they get an email with the dates blocked out in the block where everything belongs. And I also make sure now I send it to the other agent as well. So that way when they come back and say, oh, we didn't get it on a Sunday, I say, check the agreement and also check the email that we sent that had the date outlined.
Yeah. Who does like a date email in the beginning? Yeah, I think. Yeah, that is an incredibly strong move if you can do that, because then you can say, please review the following dates and let me know if there are any questions or discrepancies in what you believe is here. You can catch stuff then and there and prevent future issues, right? And kind of get ahead of it. Yeah, and it's a template, right? Just make it a template. You know, there's 6 dates you want to put in, and just make sure they're there. So let's flip to sellers. Let's start looking at the seller side of things. So let's start kind of near the beginning, right? And we're going to this way. As a seller begins to receive an offer or offers, and prices are all very similar, escrows, inspection, a lot of that's very similar. But then we come to, well, what is the buyer's financial worthiness? How do I know that this pre-approval is any good? I've never heard of this. Well, of course you haven't heard of this loan officer. You don't selling real estate every single day. But how do you kind of help a seller understand that, no, here are the checks and balances that we go through to determine, and I don't even get this letter until X, Y, and Z. So how do you have those conversations with the seller, just prepping them for some buyers are and are not as financially worthy as you probably want them to be?
That's an excellent question. One is talking to the lender, and that's very important to call the lender, but you get a pre-approval letter. Understanding the programs that they're using, because that sometimes can affect the dates and things like that. Have they done the classes that need to be done for the type of financing? In Pennsylvania, the buyer financial information is required, so they can be helpful, especially when you have a multiple offer situation. You know, I look at some things just as far as even just completeness of the contract, or even talking to the lender, how knowledgeable the lender is to that situation, or, you know, if it takes a long time to get a hold of the lender. You know, obviously they can't share their personal information, but they should be able to give you enough information to put you at ease. I tend to tell my sellers a lot of times, there is one buyer for your house. And I think for that, if I can get a sense that that's the buyer, hey, you know, my mother lives in the neighborhood, or kids go to school up the street, or I've been looking for this amount of time, and now, you know, we really love this house. I tend to tell the seller as well that, hey, this is your buyer.
Yeah.
All these other things check out, and this buyer has the best interest to be in this space. And I think it's going to be a little bit easier to negotiate and deal with, and they're going to do the things that need to be done to make this transaction happen.
A buyer's financial worthiness, yes, comes down to the credit score, the income asset, the debt to income ratios, but it also is their willingness, right? A buyer can come up against a home inspection report that has a couple things, but if they have all of that other reasons to be there, they may be willing to take on $4,500, $5,000 worth of repairs to see this house come through. So I think you're right. And please call the lender. Please call the lender. Please call the lender. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more here from the seller.
Yes, I think it's so huge to call the lenders. Oh my gosh. And it shows you then and there if this is going to be an easy transaction. Local lenders are huge too. I know it's kind of old school, but it's like, if there's a problem with the transaction, at least I can drive there and knock on the door and say, what's going on? If I can't get a hold of them. Deposits are big too. If they want the house, they should put their money where their mouth is. Bigger deposits make sense. I've had sellers accept a conventional offer instead of a cash one because they knew the cash would probably be an investment. They wanted someone who was bought in, that wanted the house, that saw a future. So I wouldn't say that cash is always king.
Motivation is king.
Yeah.
I mean, look, your financial terms are one of the many terms of your offer. And sellers are allowed to make decisions based on non-financial terms.
Yeah.
It's allowed to.
And the terms don't always have to be, what's your deposit, what's the offer price, inspections, blah, 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 blah. What if they're offering to pay for your closing costs? Like, there's so many different things that pour into the seller's net. You need to take a step out and look at how creative these offers are. I know when in the situation you said they're all very similar, but something might be more important to the seller than money. They might need flexibility. They might need time to find their next house. You never know. It really varies. Agreed.
I mean, a lot more to say on that. As a real estate agent that puts in creative offers, I'm often with my sellers explaining those things, right? You could have an offer that's $5,000 more in sales price, but is less elsewhere. So like you said, they could offer to pay 1 or 2% of transfer tax. They may offer, they may not ask for a buyer's agency, right? For a payment for the buyer. And they may not ask for that. So those are things that could be considered to save you money either in the short term or the long term.
Yep.
You know, I often say too is that, you know, maybe that the money isn't important. Maybe the actual dollar price is important. Like you said, it might be time. You know, one buyer may be conventional and want to close in 10 days. You know, whereas, you know, you have a VA loan that wants to do the full 30 or 45 days, but then asks for, you know, there's $10,000 in sales price. What's more important, your time or $10,000?
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm sorry to jump in.
No.
Something I do before I write an offer when I'm representing a buyer, I call the seller and ask them what kind of offer their seller is. I already want to make a warm introduction so they know that I'm here to communicate. I'm here to make a win-win scenario. What does your seller want? We're going to try to accommodate it as much as possible.
It's important.
And when you have 10 offers and I'm the only buyer's agent that reached out, even if our offer isn't number one when it comes to net, they know that I'm proactive already.
That's huge.
I say it all the time where it's like, how do I make you look like a hero by the offer?
So if I know that my clients are going to put an offer in, when we leave the house, I call the agent and say, hey, my showing went amazing. Your showing went amazing. My clients love the house. I'm gonna be putting in an offer. What can you tell me? You know, how many offers do you have right now? You know, this is kind of where my buyers are at. And having that conversation, you're establishing rapport straight away.
Mhm.
And sometimes that rapport makes all the difference. Because I will be honest and tell you that when I see a name that I know has been difficult in the past, I'm going to say that. I'm going to tell my sellers that, hey, you know what? This offer is fantastic. However, I've worked with this person in the past and they try to do these things. So maybe it's something to think about that it might be a complex.
You know, that's why in command, specifically in the offer comparison section of the opportunities, they made a notes section. They couldn't call it talk good or bad about the co-op agent. They just called it notes. But that's what they really said, is that we want you to have the ability to give your experience. So, so let's finish up here with this.
So, yeah, so everything everybody touched upon, about, you know, definitely call your, the lender and so forth. If it's outside, let's say, I don't want to use a name, but like a Rocket Mortgage or, you know, when somebody, big box one, where somebody is out in California and so forth, they may pre-approve somebody going through the same motions, but when I call that person and they're telling me, oh yeah, he's a great buyer, it's a great buyer, it's a great buyer, his reputation isn't on the line like my local lender's reputation is on the line. Because my local lender is going to say to me, you know what, he seems to be a really great buyer. We haven't gotten all of his paperwork back yet. Or if he hasn't turned in this yet, but everything else is really, really strong. And then you know, they're gonna make you feel, you'll get to know. So knowing the local lenders is a very important thing as well. And knowing local agents is really important. You touched upon about whether, you know, when you're accepting an offer as a seller's agent, talking to your seller. If I know an agent is a really good agent and I know that what they're, you know, they're not going to play because there are a few that I can, you know, think in the back of my head that will, every single transaction, it's the inspections and then it's the whole laundry list and we want this amount of money off. And it's always, and it's at the end of the, you know, you're already into the transaction. The house has been off the market for this amount of time and so forth. They know that they have you over. And there are certain agents that do play that a lot. So that's super, super, super important. But also absolutely, when you get an offer in, when you're going to make an offer, call the listing agent and ask not what do they like. What's the most important part? What's most important to your seller?
Yep.
And see if we can have it happen.
Yeah, not just showing time feedback.
No.
Call.
Yeah, call.
Yeah.
I actually had a purchase where I called and said, hey, can we make this work? Right? I have a client who's well qualified, who's ready to go. How do we make this work? How can we take this off the market?
You'd be shocked how many listing agents will actually give you basically the answer. What you need is to bid. $10,000, but if you tell them that, that's what they would be.
Is time on market. Right? I know we're kind of in the buyer side versus the seller side, but time on market, you know, having that that thought process, well, this house has been on the market for 60 days.
Yeah.
Right? Why don't I just call and say, let's make a deal?
Yeah.
Let's make a deal.
Yeah, what does the seller want at this point? I'm sure you probably price reduction conversation. So let's shift the topic here. Still on the seller side, and I want to come back to the home inspection. We have, as a buyer, we submit that repair request list to the listing agent. The listing agent then takes that list, presents it to the seller. They then agree on whatever repairs that they're going to make. And we say, great, now go make the repairs. Have you guys ever played Whisper Down the Lane, right? We know that sometimes what my buyer says to the buyer's agent and puts in that email, and then what that gets sent to the listing agent, how they then relay that to the seller, and then how that seller then goes and relays it to a contractor or a plumber. I mean, plumbing situations, we just had that one, right, 2 weeks ago. How do you kind of make sure, and again, you're the listing agent in this scenario, how do you make sure that the repairs get done to the letter of what that buyer's actually asking for? So have that conversation. So let's start with you, Lori, then we'll come back down to Oliver. But how are you making sure the repairs are actually getting done in time with the right accredited professional, right? How are you kind of having that conversation?
Well, when you're doing your repair request to the seller's agent, you should be putting in there done by a professional, licensed professional for most things. Things that, but that can be done by the homeowner. But I also ask for receipts to be completed, and that we have the right to reinspect.
Yep.
After the repairs are done, and the time frame when they need to have the repairs done by, so we can do.
But setting a deadline of the repair to completion by date.
Because
we don't want them the night before closing.
No,
You're getting the
no.
last 3 items done. Walkthrough is going to be a nightmare.
exactly, we go through, actually, I know Maryland is, I'm trying to think of Delaware too, 5 days prior. You can do it up to 5 days prior to the, so they should be done by that time, so that you can go and do your walkthrough, or you can send the home inspector. It may cost $100, I think it's about $100 to send that. There, it's but definitely worth having a raising.
So I can't tell you how many times.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when I went to the affiliate sales meeting last month, Vicky, the broker, she brought out the sellers or the buyer's reaffirmation of the home, on when you do walkthrough. Something to talk about and something that I want to implement in my business is handing that letter over or to the seller, right? And having them sign and agree that this house is in condition, you're buying this house and you're happy with it, right? And while the contract and handing the keys over states that document at closing states that they're good with everything the way it is that day. So it's just like having another receipt when somebody comes back and says, hey, we did the walkthrough and we missed this thing that we're really unhappy about. Well, we asked you at the time of settlement, you walk through the house, you have all the information, you have everything, you're completely happy with it, and you're good to go, right? So backing that up, that receipt thing is fantastic. During that maintenance repair time frame, right? It's about having open communication and being that conduit between the sellers and the buyers. That's our job as real estate agents. We are there to facilitate that. So I'm going to say, hey, hey Connor, you want this fixed. Are you going to do it or am I going to do it? If I'm going to do it, here's the contractor we're going to use to do it. It's going to happen on this day at this time. And I'll let you know when it's done. And you'll have pictures in hand to see the work was accomplished, right? And I'm going to make sure that happens. But ultimately, right, it's about opening that line of communication. Because when you and I are talking, that means that the seller is very informed and the buyer is very informed. And you don't have those issues that happen.
Yeah. Caroline, do you want to bring up your specific scenario?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought of you literally when
Yeah.
you got at it.
So I'll take it from the selling side, which I represented, and then I'll also look at it from the buyer side. Because there was on both sides, I feel like we could have done better.
Sure.
As the listing agent for one of my transactions, we got back the inspection report. The photo in the inspection report was of water on the ground, saying that a drain pipe is leaking. my seller brought in a plumber, fixed a drain pipe, fixed a leaking sink in the basement, we're all good to go. Well, fast forward 3 months later, they find,
After you're now closed.
yes,
It's been closed for a
they
while.
walk through. 3 months later, the buyer has found a major leak in the like sewage drain pipe that's cast iron in the house that was built in like 1930s, to the tune of $3,000. That's the cost to fix it. Buyer's agent sends me the invoice, says your seller didn't fix the drain pipe. What are they gonna do about it? And we had to go back and say, we fixed a drain pipe. You did not specify what it was, and if you, the buyer's agent, and your buyer did not feel equipped to check the work done, you should have had a professional come in and double check. They had the contact information for the plumber. They had the contact information for the attorney. There's so many different ways they could have handled it.
They had the invoice too.
They had
right?
the invoice too.
Yep.
They didn't check. So again, we all want a win-win situation with every transaction, but don't let it be to the detriment of your client. So re-inspect, like Lori said, do it. Call the plumber, walk through again with the plumber so they can point out. We had enough documents. Luckily that we were okay. But this buyer's gonna have a $3,000 fix that probably is gonna come back on the agent.
Whisper down the lane, be very specific in your repair request list.
Even I could see in that inspection report that they had access to the video and they didn't send it to me, so we just fixed a drain pipe.
Yeah.
But be specific in the location, be specific in photos, walk through. Through Delaware's agreement of sale, you can have 2 walkthroughs. So take advantage of it.
I think
Yeah, please have it. Oliver and
I want to go back to communication. You can have as many walkthroughs as you want.
Yep.
As long as you communicate with the agent, right? Well, it does say you can have 2 walkthroughs on contract if you're open with communication. You're
9 times out of 10.
other agents.
Last one on the.
I think they covered it. Communicating with your seller, part to the repairs, making sure that they have professionals to do the items that need to be done by professionals, and then following up to make sure they completed the repairs. I feel like sometimes on the seller side, I can do better with that. The seller will send me documents and I'll look at the list. But some sellers do need somebody else to come back and put their eyes on the property before the buyer gets there with the inspector.
Yeah.
To re-inspect, because sometimes things can be put easily by us that doesn't need the inspector to come out and then make everything work. The buyer now paid $100, $150 to make them come back out. You told everybody that things were done, and now everybody's a little upset.
I love your honesty there, where it's, hey, we could do a little bit better, maybe as these things are coming in, vetting them. Look, like the buck stops with us as information exchanges back and forth, right? It goes through us. So for better or for worse, the buyer and the seller are expecting that we've reviewed all of this and we've looked through it and we fine-tooth combed it and then we've sent it over. We're all guilty a little bit here and there where we've gotten an invoice and we've just kind of forwarded and then marked that it was done. Right? There's that little bit right there that could be a $4,500 issue. It could be a $3,000 issue. It could be something. Like, we do have to spend that time to vet these things.
I do think we need to be careful though as agents because we are not inspectors or like
Right.
professionals. And that doesn't mean like, in my case, there's no way that I could have gone in that basement and made sure that the drain is fixed.
Correct.
So don't pretend to be
Correct.
someone that knows it or doesn't.
And even if you do know it,
You're a real
you're
estate
taking,
agent.
You're taking you're doing scope of practices. So last 5 minutes, we kind of do lightning round here. And we'll come down to the next movie. While you're going through with a seller, there are things that are happening under contract. All of a sudden, we have a little bit of an inspection concern. You might have an appraisal concern. We may have a buyer home sale contingency that's not quite, satisfied to where you'd like it. And all of a sudden, you're like, I got 10 days of closing. I got multiple contingencies that have not been met yet. And your seller's sitting here like, should I start packing? Should I even be ready to get out of the house in 10 days? Like, I feel like I'm going to do all this work. If this thing won't go, like, I can't move all this stuff in a store. So there starts to become this kind of timing issue, right? So how do you kind of handle we haven't met all of our contingencies yet, but I do need you to like literally start as if they were all going to be met, because we know sometimes all that stuff comes together in the last 3 days. So how do you manage that kind of storm that a seller is like, my security, my home is up in flux. I don't know if I'm actually moving or not, but I got to start doing all this stuff. So how do you just manage that tsunami that happens?
One thing I do with my sellers is schedule to talk to them on every Tuesday. So they know at a minimum, we're going to talk on Tuesday, right? While you're on the market, a lot of times we see the activity over the weekend. We have offers and things like that or feedback. I can get that back to you Tuesday. While we're going through these items, if the date hasn't come up, at a minimum, I'm going to talk to you on Tuesday about what's coming up in the future. So I try not to let them get into that tsunami feeling, because if I talk to you every Tuesday, you can at least know what's going on and what's open and what's not open. And you know, just reassuring the clients sometimes that, hey, I've been here before, right? You know, I know we have things that are unresolved, that need to be resolved, but typically this can be resolved in this amount of time frame. We won't have this issue. Or if it seems like it is going to be an issue with the date, then being able to, you know, figure out what works with them and what works on the buyer side, and have contingency plans in place to say,
Yep.
hey, if these things don't get cleared up, you know, we can do a credit, or we move back settlement, or, you know, whatever is most comfortable.
Get ahead of it.
Get ahead of it, asking questions to figure out what the.
Okay.
I feel like communication with this is huge. I've had clients who are literally driving cross country, taking all of their stuff with them to Arizona when we were supposed to be settling. And then we find out that lender doesn't have documents we need to settle. And we're like, and of course, on the selling side, like, we didn't know what this was happening. So if someone was communicating with us, letting us know prior, this would have been a lot less stressful. But luckily, the clients have made it through favor. And they just kept calling me, and I checked in with them. I feel like at every state they pass through, letting them know if there's an update or what we're waiting on. So communication is good.
I feel like being proactive in that scenario, right? Having the ear of the lender, of the buyer. Hey, hey Connor, how's things going? I know we're waiting on this document. Could you let me know when this lands with, the details? Can you let me know as soon as that happens so that we can schedule this? This literally hinges on you doing what you need to do, right? Calling the agent. Hey, listen, man, I need this to happen. I'm an answers guy. I'm not a problems guy. So if I call my client, it's going to be with answers. So I am very proactive and very active within the transaction to get those answers. And then when my clients say, "Oh my God, what's happening?" Well, guess what? This is kind of where we're at. We have this one and this one and this one. This one should happen in the next 12 to 24 hours, and this one should happen, right? I know you're nervous and I know things are working, but please do me the favor of just go ahead and start getting this stuff rolling, right? If we have to, here's a document that's already set up that says, these are the rules, these are the things that we need to do, these are the requests that we're going to have. If we bust this time, we're going to request this, and have all of that on standby so that they know as soon as that contingency fails, we just send the addendum that says, hey, we want to extend. We're going to allow you to extend 2 weeks, but we're going to also charge you this stuff, this in return, right? We're asking for these things in return. I understand that this is tight, so maybe we're going to ask for something, along the way, right? Post close or something that's going to make it amenable to both client and just be ready for it.
All right, Lori.
And I like about what you were saying, that they know ahead of time what to expect. And that was the same thing as when we first started. My very first question was making sure that the buyer knows what to expect by going over exactly what's going to happen. Same thing with the seller. This is what's going to happen during the process. We are going to set expectation dates. Sometimes when those dates do not happen, and we have to do extensions and so forth. But this is why we have to make sure that it's a good offer, that the lender that we trust the lender, and all the other components that go along with it, so that if we do have to extend, it's we're going to get answers on all ends. And I think that they understand that there's always a possibility that things are going to we have to be fluid with the situation, that they're not going to be as nervous and panicked if it does happen.
So I'm going to say one thing, and then I just want to take a picture of you guys up here for social media. Those of you that have pace. It's a 4-letter acronym. Anybody know what PACE stands for? PACE, the military term. So you always have multiple plans in place. You have your primary plan, which is the one we all think is going to happen. We do have an alternative plan, just in case something goes slightly awry. I do have a contingency plan that's not likely, but should a couple dominoes fall the wrong way, this is where we're going to be. But I also have an emergency plan. I have a stop, drop, and roll emergency plan at the end. You may not have to write it down and articulate it every time, but mentally, you should be going through that exercise every time anything comes up and your willingness to navigate it with a seller, with a buyer. Here's what we're going to do should something arise. Okay. You guys ready for your word picture?
Can I drop one more piece?
Please.
So in that inspection time, especially with your seller, what I like to do when we talk about how much you're going to get from the house, I tell my sellers, do me a favor and cut $5,000 off of that. Do me a favor and cut a certain amount of money off that you can live without, right? This is your contingency money. This is your credit money. Oftentimes they don't touch that. But when they do, it's not concerning. It's not a heartbreak because they're already planning for 5,000 less, right? And when they don't touch it, guess who you are? You're Superman, right? You're a hero because they didn't have to touch that money. But if they do, you're still a rock star.
Great picture. All right. Thank you. Great. All right. Wonderful. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.